Hi, I'm Holly Andrews, Integrative Nutrition Health Coach and Executive Wellness Coach. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the kitchen. Today, I have a true Southern treat for you in my gluten-free, gut-friendly heirloom tomato pie. When I was at the farmer's market yesterday, I saw these gorgeous heirloom tomatoes and I thought, I need some of those. What am I going to do with them? And I immediately thought about tomato pie. Now, if you haven't had tomato pie, it is a Southern staple and I absolutely love it. I only had it for the first time, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, honestly, but it has become a true favorite. As I was thinking about it, traditional tomato pie is a flaky pastry crust. The filling has a lot of mayonnaise and things like that. And I knew, one, I couldn't do a gluten version. Two, I wanted to do something that was going to be a little bit more gut friendly. So I came up with a gluten-free crust and a gut-friendly filling. So let's talk about what makes this particular heirloom tomato pie so special, and then we'll get to how to actually put it together. So obviously we have heirloom tomatoes. I wound up using almost exactly 3 very large heirloom tomatoes for this pie. But depending on the size of your pie pan and the size of your tomatoes, you may need more, you may need less, it just depends. But you can see how large the tomatoes were. They were very large heirlooms. But they are full of lycopene, which is an ingredient that we need and we can't get outside of food. So tomatoes are full of them. They're obviously full of vitamin C, lots of antioxidants, all the things that we want, plus extremely amazing flavor in the heirlooms, all coming together to help stabilize our blood sugar and reduce inflammation loads. In the crust, I chose to use almond flour, which is much lower in carbs than traditional wheat flour. It's obviously naturally gluten-free. In the recipe on the blog, I give you an option to use almond flour and a little bit of oat flour. If you are celiac, make sure that you are using certified gluten-free oat flour. That is really important. It has to be certified gluten-free if you are celiac. So keep that in mind, but I chose to use just straight up almond flour. I love the almond flour because it helps support stable blood sugar. It has a little bit of protein in it. It's got some great healthy fats in it, so you're getting those as well in this recipe. So it's a great naturally gluten-free option for you there. In place of mayonnaise, I have chosen to use a whole milk Greek yogurt, plain Greek yogurt, a whole milk organic Greek yogurt. You can also use ricotta if that is something that you want to do. That would be another great option. You could also potentially use some avocado mayonnaise if you wanted it to be a little bit more rich, a little bit more creamy maybe, but still be healthier for you. An avocado mayonnaise might be a great option. I went with the Greek yogurt. I will say, be sure that if you're going to use the yogurt, get the whole milk yogurt. If you use the non-fat yogurt, you run the risk of the yogurt curdling while the pie is baking. But that full fat whole milk version is going to help prevent that yogurt from curdling while it's baking. I went with the yogurt because I wanted the good probiotics. I wanted the good cultures, again, making this more gut friendly. So that's why I chose that option for the filling. And finally, we've got wonderful fresh herbs and dried herbs. There's some dried herbs in the crust, and let me tell you, when I pulled that crust out after par baking it, which we'll talk about here in a minute, it smelled amazing. And then I had some basil, and I ran out to my garden and got some fresh thyme for the filling. So we've got the fresh herbs, which offer flavor and antioxidants and antimicrobial benefits. So again, keeping this really fresh, summery, but also gut friendly. So let's talk about how to put this pie together. So to make the pie, the first thing I did was I got my crust going. Okay, so that was really easy to come together. I had 2 cups of almond flour, or again, on the blog, you can find the almond flour / oat flour ratios if you want to go that route, but I don't know that you necessarily need to. It's just an option. A little bit of salt, a little bit of garlic powder, a little bit of dried thyme, and it gave a kind of for a savory option for the crust, and it is optional. You don't have to add in the thyme or the garlic, but I wanted to make this really savory and full of flavor, so that's why I chose to do that. So mix all of those ingredients together with 1 egg and then 3 tablespoons of either ghee or olive oil. I chose to use the ghee, which is clarified butter. I have an organic ghee that I'm using, but 3 tablespoons of that melted. And then you just mix that all together in a bowl and it kind of starts to stick together and it looked like a dough. I had a 9.5-inch pie pan. I sprayed that with some olive oil spray and then evenly spread the almond flour crust dough into that pie pan, making sure that it got up the sides as much as possible. Probably would have been better with just a straight up 9-inch pie pan, but all I had was 9.5-inch, so that's what I went with. And then you're gonna stick that in the refrigerator for about 20 to 30 minutes before par baking it at 350 for 10 to 12 minutes. Forgot to mention, before you stick that pie crust in the refrigerator, make sure you poke the bottom of it with a fork. So I just did a few rows of fork holes before I stuck it, covered it, cling wrap, and then stuck it in the fridge. Now, since I made this pie crust yesterday, it just sat in the fridge yesterday, all night long and today until I was ready to actually do the par baking. But you really only need to have it in there for about 20 to 30 minutes to chill. So while my oven was preheating, and I went ahead and I got my heirloom tomatoes sliced up. Once they were sliced, I laid them out onto paper towels and then sprinkled them with a little bit of salt, just a little bit of salt. And what that does is the paper towels help absorb moisture from the tomatoes. The salt is going to help pull out some of that moisture from the tomatoes, helping prevent a overly watery pie. We don't really want that at all. So the paper towels are going to help absorb that moisture. You need to let them sit out for about 15 minutes. So that whole process of slicing the tomatoes, laying them out on the paper towels, letting them sit there with the salt for about 15 minutes took really as long as it took to preheat the oven, par bake the pie, and then I let the pie crust sit for about 5 minutes just to cool off a little bit before putting the filling in. Also, while the crust was par baking and the tomatoes were sweating, I put together the creamy filling base layer. So I started with a cup of shredded white cheddar cheese. Now I shredded this myself from a block, but you could use Gruyere or even Gouda would be really good. So pick a cheese that you like, but preferably a white cheese, just because it looks better when the pie is cut. I shredded a cup of that white cheddar myself, and so I started with that. I added in a 1/4 cup of the Greek yogurt, and then I added in my herbs. So I had chopped up a tablespoon of basil, I had my tablespoon of thyme that I had stripped off the stem straight from the garden, threw those together, and pepper, a little bit of pepper, threw that in, mixed that all up together, and then that was it. So once it was time to assemble everything, these tomatoes had finished sweating. I made sure to dab them off and really try to get as much moisture as possible out. The crust had cooled. I brought the crust over to my counter and then I spread the cheese, yogurt, herb mixture into the bottom of the crust evenly. And then I started layering my tomatoes. And again, I did use almost exactly the 3 full tomatoes slices and then just layered them and, pieced them together so that, they filled up the pie pan. And I drizzled a little bit of olive oil over top and sprinkled a little bit more thyme herbs on top, just for kind of some extra flavor and aesthetic. And then I popped it back into the oven, a 350-degree oven for 35 minutes. And it's just about done. So I'm gonna pull it out, let it cool off a little bit, and then I'll show you the finished product. All right, so the pie is out of the oven. It's cooled for about 12, 13 minutes. You can let it cool anywhere between 10 to 15 before cutting it, but this is the pie. How pretty does that look? I think it looks beautiful. It smells amazing, and I don't see a ton of extra liquid, which is a great thing. So this pie makes 8 servings. I will say that if you are going to serve it, you probably need to add something with a little extra protein in it. There's plenty of fat, there's plenty of carbs in this recipe, but not so much protein. So I would definitely pair it with an extra source of protein for a complete meal, and I've got some pairing suggestions on the blog post with the recipe, so be sure and check out that link in the description below. I hope that you enjoy this recipe. Take advantage of the seasonal heirloom tomatoes that are just gorgeous right now, and try out this true Southern staple, especially if you've never had it. If you've had it before, try out this gluten-free, gut-friendly version and let me know what you think in the comments. So until next time, I'm Holly Andrews, and I believe that you can heal your stress from the inside out.